Mortal Shell is the latest Soulsesque adventure game from Cold Symmetry. Now, there are a few twists and things that make it unique compared to Dark Souls, which is, the obvious example that everyone's going to compare it to. In this game, rather than leveling up your character where you get the souls and then you level up your stats, there are essentially 4 shells that you can find throughout the world, and each of those have their own pre-made builds, so to speak. And one will, for example, have a lot of health but hardly any stamina. There's one that's more of a strong warrior. There's one that seems to have ways of NPCs that will surely help you. And then there's another that's a roguelike that has a lot of stamina but not so much health and is very weak on armour. So you want to pick which shell suits your builds. But there's a bit more to it than that, because obviously you will gather tar, which is this game's equivalent of souls, and glimpses, and you'll use both of these in combination to purchase memories for your character, that particular shell, and those will give you new abilities and special features for that particular shell. Or you can choose to forsake all shells completely and just run as yourself. But that's, the kinds of the point of the game was to inhabit the various shells and explore them, so there might be secrets for not inhabiting the shell. But then there are also 4 weapons that you can find, and each of those will have their own things that you can do and upgrades that you can do to them, and it's through upgrading the particular weapon that you get more damage. And that can be very useful to know, because you might think, well, why can't I upgrade the shell to do more damage, or to have more health and more armor and all that? But that's not how this game works. It's got its own unique feel to it through that, and there are a few other unique mechanics that I'll go into which make it stand out from Dark Souls. The combat itself is designed to be difficult, obviously, but if you do upgrade your damage on your weapon, you will make it a lot easier, but you'll have to go and find the necessary items to do these upgrades, and some upgrades will also give you additional power things that you can use. And also, if you talk to the one specific NPC, you'll gain the parry move, which again, you could choose to master that, or you can also choose to adapt your own technique to use the game's unique harden ability, which is different to a shield but also very effective if you work it correctly with your combinations, because not only will your character freeze, you can use it to make your hits hit harder if you harden at exactly the right opportunity, but also whilst you're hardened you will regain your stamina, so you can use it to manipulate regaining stamina whilst also effectively putting up a block. And once an enemy hits you, most enemies will be staggered and provide you an opportunity to counterattack and prevent their powerful attack. And you can also use it with certain items to regain health, and there's a lot of complex things to learn around the hardening mechanic. But for the most part, it's a pretty interesting and unique ability that's better than a shield, but also can cause you some problems if you do it at the wrong time, or you mess it up. It can really stand in your way, but I like it. I preferred it over the parry because of the uniqueness of it and how effective it can be. Of course, bosses don't get staggered by it, but it's still good because it will eat up the hits and you won't take damage, and you'll be provided an opportunity to escape or counterattack and maybe stagger the enemy, get a riposte on them and get all the interesting moves that you can learn and do things with to defeat your enemies. Now, obviously, that being said, I did expect from the premise that you'd be able to take over pretty much any enemy and become those enemies by inhabiting their shells, but that's not really how it works. Like I said, you've only got 4 shells that you can find hidden, some behind mini-bosses and, some just out in the open. There'll be these that you use to do the majority of the game. But, whilst a lot of the enemies, it would be interesting to be able to take them over because they have interesting skills and weapons and abilities, but I can see why they didn't go through that, especially as the weapon is separate to the shell. So you find your own particular weapon and you use that throughout the entire game, and the shells have their own abilities and capabilities, and then you use these to defeat the enemies of the land and fight your way through to the bosses. Now, there are essentially 3 separate areas, which I'll call tombs, to go explore to find what you need to do to progress the game, and then one big central hub world, which is like a huge intertwining maze of winding paths and little crawl holes and shortcuts and tunnels and secrets everywhere. So, you know, it's up to you which order you take things in. It's open world, obviously, but some areas might be more difficult than others, and you might want to go explore them later. The only problem with that is that the ice world, if you pass a certain point in that, you are soft locked into defeating the actual boss of the area before you can escape. So whilst you might think, I want to go do something else, you're forced to take on that challenge and defeat it if you ever want to escape. And each of these has their own boss. So essentially there are 3 main bosses and 1 final boss, but you can, like I say, find the optional mini bosses and challenges all over the place, and then there are optional big bosses to go find and secrets to discover, and a whole heap of lore and, you know, things to talk to people about and explore, and, you know, finding and unlocking the abilities and finding your character that works right for you. Maybe there's some that work better for bosses, maybe there's some that definitely work better for specific areas, especially TL, who has the ability to make poison cure him. So whilst he's the one that has the least armor and pretty much dies in 2 hits, if he gets poisoned, he got regen, so that can be very, very useful. And then you can adapt powers to make him so that he emits a poison cloud himself, so, you know, he can provide his own curing. And, you know, you can adapt your strategies to work around what works for you in terms of combat. And there are many different things you can do, many things to explore. There's a lot of items to go find, most of which you might not necessarily have use for, because, you know, like I say, if you pretty much just find the things to upgrade your weapon, and then you want to unlock with the Tower and the Glimpses your abilities of the innate shell, and then go through the challenges, you can go through the game pretty quickly. It took me 9 hours to get to the end, and I also found a secret meme ending, but there's still all the secret stuff, like there's secrets in the fog to go discover, and, you know, I could fight the NPCs and anger them, and I believe they would also become bosses. But, you know, for a basic playthrough, it took me about 9 hours to get to the ending, so your time may differ. I've seen people say that it took them 20 hours to get through for the average gamer, but I guess, you know, maybe I'm just better. But, you know, some of the bosses I did struggle with for a few times, but for the most part I managed to get their patterns down pretty quickly and then get through them. So, you know, I like it. It's a fun and interesting addition to the genre. It's got its own things, especially the hardening mechanic, because, like I said, that can be used in a lot of different ways, and you can also just choose to play in a different style, because if you choose to parry and counter-attack like that, you know, in the traditional sort of Soulsesque way, you can choose to do that, or, you know, you can choose any sort of different strategy that just works for you. So it's quite interesting how well you can adapt your different strategies to the different shells or different types of ways you want to play and approach the game. It would have been nice if there was more to explore, but, you know, the main central area is a huge maze in itself, so it's very easy to get lost. And it's nice that they added the touch to sense the things. So if in the central area where it initially leads you to, you see the ghosts of the different shells and the different weapons that you can collect, and if you touch them, it gives you brief glimpses of hints as to which direction to go, and you can use them to follow to lead you towards the items. And also, you know, that will also lead you towards the areas which you need to go to defeat the bosses. So it's good that they've provided that sort of hinting system in there as well, because otherwise you might get very lost in the Fulgrim outskirts and the marshes. But yeah, I definitely recommend going and checking out the game for yourself. It's pretty fun, and, you know, I had a lot of fun, and it's challenging as well, but not insurmountable. You can definitely defeat the bosses, and you can definitely defeat the game. even without being able to upgrade your own, damage, taking your armor and all that. You can do more damage, you can apply that to your weapons, but you really don't need to apply more health. You can farm. That's the one thing I had a problem with, though, is the farming of the healing, because they regrow over time, and whereas in traditional Souls-like games you refill your Estus upon death. With this, you're running around, you collect the heals, you can farm them up ready for a boss and have a lot of them ready, but if you haven't been doing that, you might find yourself lacking heals between boss attempts, and you might just want to throw yourself at it a few times whilst you're waiting for the thing to regrow, so that you've got like 6 or 7 in hand to heal up or something like that. Or if you go find the shell that's got a lot of health, so you don't need to concern yourself with that, then there's things that you can do to get around it. But at the same time, I can see that might be an approachable thing that makes it harder for a lot of people to approach the game because of the way the healing system works. But other than that, I had a good time, and I definitely would recommend it, so go check it out for yourself.